So these are some basic points of what we should do. The most important point is that we should keep all our applications and operating systems updated. So whenever you get any notification for such an update on your device, you should immediately install all these updates, so that if there is any vulnerability inside your system, it can actually be fixed at the soonest before somebody can attack. And then it is important that an antivirus should be there on your machine. This is obviously, these directions are for layman users, not for experts. But we are talking about this is only an introductory course today, so we are talking about these. Then it is very important that we don't use we never use pirated software. You might have heard about these APK files which are there. So if there is a paid software for Android, then you can actually go onto Google, you'll find the cracked version or the patched version of that particular software or application. Then you can simply download that file and you can install it. Similarly, for Windows as well, you can find out the exe file and install the patch along with it. But it's important that we don't do this, because along with the patch, it is possible that it could contain some kind of malware which may be able to steal your data or compromise your system entirely. So just a basic about how antiviruses work. So just like humans have fingerprints, in a similar way, all files that are there on a particular system, whenever you create a new software, it is actually inside a file, some executable file which is used for installing it. So whenever you create any file, it also has a fingerprint. So in technical terms, we call these as hashes. So just like a fingerprint, which is a small image of your fingertip, can actually be used to identify you. In a similar way, hashes can actually be used to identify a particular file. So whenever a new malware is actually discovered and it is known by the antivirus vendor, they actually add the definition of that hash inside the antivirus tool. So if you use antiviruses, you might have seen that it keeps downloading the definitions from the internet, from the antivirus vendor's website. So these definitions contain the hashes or the fingerprints of all the malicious files which are known to us at this point of time. So whenever you try to execute a new file on your system, it matches the fingerprint with the ones that are stored inside the antivirus. And if it finds that this is actually a malicious application, it actually blocks it. So this is in a very basic way how an antivirus works. And it is very important to keep an antivirus on your device. You could actually use free antiviruses as well. There are a lot of good free antiviruses which are there. But for the more advanced features, you actually need to pay for them. So the next kind of attack, until now we've been actually discussing the weaknesses or vulnerabilities in computer systems or in the configuration or security policies. Basically something to do with software and hardware or the technical side of things. But the biggest vulnerability inside the entire system is actually some human. It is actually us, because we make the most mistakes. Computer systems don't make mistakes as such. They do exactly what they're programmed to do. But people can actually make mistakes, and people are the weakest link in the entire chain. So what is social engineering? So social engineering is basically exploiting the human link in the security chain. And you can do this by psychologically manipulating the person who's handling the computer system into performing some actions which is able to divulge confidential information, or the attacker will be able to actually get hold of the system entirely. So some of the common attacks are like phishing, honey trapping. We're going to look at these different kinds of attacks. Phishing, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but it actually is a term which has been coined by joining two words again. So initially, phishing was used to actually get hold of the account passwords of users. So phishing comes from password phishing, the phishing with the F. So when you get hold of the password of any user, then you can actually log on to their accounts, and then you can compromise. You can actually get hold of a lot of confidential information. So that is what phishing basically is. That it is used for fraudulently obtaining private information, basically login ID, passwords, or some other information as well. So how phishing is executed is that you'll get some email inside your mailbox, which will say that you need to go to do a particular website, and you need to enter some confidential information. So, for example, you receive an SMS on your mobile that your bank is actually upgrading its systems, and you need to update your password on the net banking website so that you can continue to use it. So when you click on that link inside the message, it will take you to a particular website which will look exactly like your bank's website, and you'll enter your login ID and your password, and it will be sent to the attacker. So now the attacker will have your login ID and password, and then they can log in into either your bank account or maybe even your email account or Facebook account or anything like that. So nowadays, since the income tax season is on, and I believe the last date is the end of this month. So income tax phishing SMSs and emails are being circulated pretty commonly nowadays. You might have come across this, and this has actually been going on for several years now. And then you'll get an SMS that there is some income tax which is supposed to be refunded into your account, and you need to update your information on the ITR website. So this is an example of this email which is saying that there are 47,000 rupees which needs to be refunded to you, and then you need to click on this link to actually claim your refund. So when you click on that link, you will actually land up on this website, which will look like the income tax department's website. And if you can see, the URL does not belong to the income tax department. It is some random website.com, and then the page has been uploaded on some random folder inside the website. So there you can see that it is saying you need to select your bank. So when you select your bank from this drop down, it will show you options for State Bank of India, Citibank, Axis Bank, all the common banks. When you click on that, you will be taken to the phishing website of your bank, and then your login ID and password will actually be taken. So this is an example of a phishing page of RBI. You can see the original website is rbi.org.in, and the fake website is e-rbi.gov.in. So they'll try to create these genuine looking domain names, and then people can actually be fooled easily by this. So this is another example of phishing of Paytm. You can see that the page actually looks like the Paytm OTP page, although there is nothing else on the website. But the domain is something else. It says KYCUP something.in. So this is another example how banking applications are actually fraudulent banking applications are actually circulated. So if you search for the APK file of a particular bank, it's possible that you land up on some website which will give you the fraudulent application instead. And when you download that APK file and install it on your device, it will actually compromise your bank account and your device as well. Then these are some basic examples how phishing is actually carried out. So you can see that if it is the first one is actually compromised web server. So if I am able to compromise some website, for example, if I am able to compromise Facebook.com, and I am able to place subfolder /State Bank of India /login over there. This is just an example. So anyone who's actually coming to the page might just look at this red part of the domain and may think that this is the genuine website, although the genuine website is actually over here. The actual website which you are accessing is actually over here in the first part, which ends in .com. Similarly, this is another example where you might create subdomains inside the actual domain. So this is www.bank.com.freespace.sitename.com. So the actual website is free space sitename.com. But we are putting bank.com in front of it, so people might be confused. Then the third example is called type spotting, which means you are actually buying a domain name which looks like the domain of the genuine website, but there will be some small little spelling mistake over there, which most users may not be able to notice. And then there are URL shortening services. If you go to these websites, they will be able to shorten the URL for you. For example, if I have a long domain or URL that I have to send, for example, facebook.com/State Bank of India /login/index.php, something of that sort, then you can go to these URL shorteners, log into their website, and then they will shorten the URL for you. They will give you an alternate URL like this, which will redirect to the original page. So these are used by attackers to hide the domain of the fraudulent website. So similarly, these are the simple attacks, and then there are more spelling mistake attacks you can see over here, like facebook.com, the A is different, hotmail.com, the I is actually a 1. And similarly, these can be done. And then there are HTML forms which used to be embedded as attachments inside emails, and then when you fill up that form, it will actually take your information to the attacker. So these are some very basic types of phishing attacks, and these are some countermeasures that we can take against phishing attacks. Very simple things to keep in mind, that we need to always check the email source. We need to see where the email is actually coming from, and it is possible to actually spoof this as well. It's not completely foolproof that this thing email source that you see, the from address inside your email, as I discussed earlier, that can actually be spoofed, and somebody can send you a fake email from somewhere, and then you will think that it is coming from your bank or from your email provider. So the next point is that you should not click on links inside emails. It's always best to actually copy the URL and then place it inside the address bar and then press enter instead of clicking on links, because it's actually possible to hide the actual URL behind the text that you see over there. So if it says click here, then the link is actually embedded behind it. So it's better to right click on such links and then copy it and then paste it in the address bar instead of directly clicking on links. Then you should always check the link before you actually visit the particular website. So you should make sure that you just read out the URL before you actually open the website to make sure that it is the genuine website. Then if you have a doubt, you can always, if it is a famous website of your email provider or your bank, if you don't know the domain name, it's best to actually search for it on some good search engine. Then you'll get, most of the times you'll actually get the genuine website from there. And then you should not fill up forms inside emails. I think we already discussed HTML forms in the previous slide. So moving on to the next slide. So we are done with phishing. The next example is called the malicious attachment. So malicious means any bad intention. So any attachment inside an email which has been sent with a bad intention of compromising your data, or to compromise your machine, or to hinder your system from doing its task, then such kind of attachments are called malicious attachments. And normally we would expect that if you're using Windows, then only an exe file can actually be malicious and can actually be some virus or malware, but that is not the case. Malware can actually be embedded inside PDF files, inside documents, inside zip files, inside exe files. So even PowerPoint slides, it can actually be embedded in any kind of file. So it's imperative. The thing to keep in mind is that you should not open email attachments unless you're absolutely sure of where it is coming from. So if you know that if you're expecting some kind of attachment in your email from your colleague or from your friends, then only you should open it. Otherwise, you should first scan it with your antivirus and then only open it. So this is an example of how malicious attachments are actually circulated. This is the mail will always have some kind of urgency to it. It will appear to come from some superior employee, and then it will say that please find attached an urgent message from Joint Secretary on the above mentioned subject. So this particular mail will have an attachment inside it, which will be a simple doc file. And when you open that document file, it will actually drop a particular executable or a malware on your machine, which will be able to compromise your system. So moving on to the next kind of attacks, which is called honey trapping. So the attacker will actually send you a friend request on Facebook or on your Instagram or any other social media account, and then they will start talking to you for some time casually, and then as you become friendly, they'll start sending you some random links, and they'll say that my messenger is not working, and please install this particular new messenger. It is very good. And once you install that messenger, they'll say that we'll start chatting over there. So when you start talking over there, it will be actually a messenger application, but it will have some embedded malware inside it, which can actually encrypt your data, and then it could be a ransomware also asking you for bitcoins to get your data back, or it could actually steal a lot of confidential information. So this is not a theoretical attack. This is a practical attack which was actually carried out on several of our defense personnel, and it actually was in the news as well. So it's very important. You should prevent, you should not add any random people on your social media profiles. We're going to look at this in detail in the future slides as well. So some basic steps on how we can stay safe on the web. These are actually some things that laymen and even experts can actually do. So if you want to find out what all information that you have actually shared and with what is available publicly on the web about you, you can just search for yourself on Google or Bing. You can actually try to do that. And the best way to do it is to actually keep your name in double quotes, which will give you exact results of your name. So if you just search for yourself on Google, you will be able to find out a lot of publicly available information about you that these search engines have actually been able to pull out from various social media profiles or from various websites where you might have registered. So just try to do this simple trick, and you'll find out a lot of information is there. Then another trick is to look for images, because a lot of social media websites actually share their images and all their data publicly onto search engines. So it's possible that some photo that you shared publicly 10 years back on your Facebook accounts is actually visible on the Google Images page. So just look through the images, through the basic first page, you'll be able to find out a lot of information. And when you find such information, as far as possible, you should remove any confidential information from being available publicly on the web. So this is what I call self-audit. This is like you should go onto all your social media profiles, and then you should check for all the photos and your text posts that you have made for any personally identifiable information, or PII as it is called in the cybersecurity domain. So if there is any kind of PII which is there on your social media profiles, it could be your address, it could be your phone number, or it could be your Aadhaar number if you have mistakenly posted it. So there was an example where a gentleman was actually taking a picture of himself, a selfie of himself, and then he posted it onto Facebook. But what happened was, while he was taking the selfie, his Aadhaar card was actually lying on the desk. So when he posted that selfie online, he actually leaked his own Aadhaar card onto the social media platform. And if you have not enabled the proper security settings inside your Facebook accounts, you know that information is actually available publicly. So anybody could actually search for his name, and then they might be able to find out even his Aadhaar card number online. So this is a very simple very simple way that you can actually unintentionally leave some confidential information of yourself publicly available. So it's always best to actually go through all your previous posts and your photos and check if such information is there. Then the last point is that you need to go through your security settings and make sure that you have enabled all the tightest possible security settings. Only your friends on your profile should be able to look at your information. It should not be available publicly.